We sat down, we looked at what will the world look like when our graduates leave us in 2031. We think will be the year our first graduates leave us. And so we looked at, okay, what might the world look like economically, socially, environmentally, geopolitically? What might the workforce actually look like? What might sort of technological change look like, and how might that impact the world around us? And then from there, from that understanding of what we're actually preparing students for, we define the 10 most important things based on current research, current practice, our experience, speaking with different stakeholders, the 10 most important things we think our students need to succeed in that sort of future, sometimes uncertain, but definitely rapidly changing world. And, the things that came through are really unique and exciting. And number one was helping students find self-awareness and purpose in life.
So hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to this podcast. I'm Chelsea Dean. I'm the Curriculum Director at TomoClub, and I'll be your host today. For many educators, the ultimate dream isn't just to lead a school, but to build one from ground up. So to take a vision and turn it into a living, breathing community of learners, that journey must be very bizarre. Right. So today we're exploring the adventure of a school startup with someone who has done just that. And we're joined by Dr. Matthew Schulte, founding head of school at the Raoul Wallenberg International School in Palma de Mallorca, Spain. Originally from Australia, Dr. Schulte has a rich background in international education across multiple continents and is also an active researcher focusing on how schools can make a real-world impact. So Matthew, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever.
All right. So just to begin, your journey has been extremely fascinating, right from public schools in Melbourne to founding an international school in America. What was that spark that made you decide to take on such an incredible challenge of starting a school from scratch?
Yeah. Firstly, I liked international schools in Mallorca because we are working on a series of international schools here and around the world. But look, I suppose there wasn't a specific spark. I've always loved teaching and learning. I'm a teacher by trade. And I always knew early on I'd love to run my own school and build my own school eventually. And so when this opportunity arose, as you said, to sort of build something truly meaningful from the ground up that we all really believe in, that was an opportunity I had to jump at.
Could you tell me a little bit about how your journey has looked like? What was the beginning of, how did you get into education in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I, from Melbourne, Australia, loved sport. I played a lot of sport and ended up doing a sports science degree. But pretty early in that degree, I realised what I really wanted to do is teach sport and share my love and passion for physical education. So I transitioned into a physical education degree and followed up with a master's degree, and loved teaching mostly PE and outdoor education in Melbourne. But my other passion in life was always travel, and that was always part of my journey to go and travel the world. So, I really sort of fell into that opportunity where I had a profession that I could travel the world using and still teaching. So I did that, and I first landed in Sweden where I met my wife and spent many years teaching and as a vice principal of Stockholm International School. And from there, a bit of time in Switzerland at a school there, and then Hong Kong was the next stage of the adventure, where I spent the last 5 years on the senior leadership team at a great school there. But after 5 years there, it was time for the next challenge, which for me had to be sort of leading and building a school from the ground up.
And you've had all the possible international exposure, from what I can hear. Why did you choose Spain specifically?
Yeah, I suppose Spain chose us, and I say us, my wife and I and our little one. It wasn't. We were actually not looking at Europe at all. We wanted to stay in Asia or Australia, so we were looking for opportunities there, and nothing that really excited us came up. And then I was contacted about this role, and I have that Swedish connection. My wife's Swedish, and it's a Swedish company opening their first international school abroad. So that was a big tick for us. And And we sort of went through that process of looking at Mallorca in Spain. We'd been here on holiday, but never thought about living here. And wow, it's a tremendous place. It really ticks all the boxes for a young family looking for a great lifestyle and balance in their life. So personally, it made sense. And then just professionally, as I said before, the opportunity to be handed the keys to a most extraordinary building, and to be able to lay the blueprint, the groundwork for a series of international schools over hope for the next few years. You'll see some RWISs popping up.
We'll be very excited to know more about that for sure. So we know that your school also began with a vision, right? Or at least there was a vision when you went into this entire process. What was the core problem that you wanted to solve, or at least a unique opportunity that you saw in Mallorca that led to the creation of the Raoul Wallenberg International School?
Yeah, it's a good question from two parts. I think one is our guiding statements, our vision and values as a school are founded in our namesake, Raoul Wallenberg, a famous humanitarian from Sweden. And he's our role model, and we sort of take his values of honesty, compassion, courage, and drive, and through that we build a program around what we call holistic learning, where we really focus on character development and well-being of children. And I suppose that's the gap we saw in the market here. There are great schools here in Mallorca, but my assessment is that they're very traditional schools as well, and there's not a lot of true international schools with that really holistic focus and a real focus on character development of young people. So we realised that what we offer as an organisation is something that might be missing here in Mallorca, and it's sort of a gap that we could fill here in the market. And I think we've seen that in this first year and a half. The families joining us are really looking for a holistic education where students are at the centre of every decision, and that we really focus on character development as well as academic, social, emotional development.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely, when we're talking about identifying core problems, you're constantly looking at what is missing, right? Like you're constantly looking at where that gap is. And I'm so glad that you're able to identify it in the form of, say, social emotional skills, or even, can I also say, any sort of future ready skills?
Absolutely. So we've built our framework, our how we define high quality teaching and learning around future focused learning. So what we did, actually was the first thing I did with the new team last year. We sat down, we looked at what will the world look like when our graduates leave us in 2031. We think will be the year our first graduates leave us. And so we looked at, okay, what might the world look like economically, socially, environmentally, geopolitically? What might the workforce actually look like? What might sort of technological change look like, and how might that impact the world around us? And then from there, from that understanding of what we're actually preparing students for, we define the 10 most important things based on current research, current practice, our experience, speaking with different stakeholders, the 10 most important things we think our students need to succeed in that sort of future, sometimes uncertain, but definitely rapidly changing world. And, the things that came through are really unique and exciting. And number one was helping students find self-awareness and purpose in life. Really making sure that when students leave our school, they have passion and purpose in what they do. And then, you can sort of go down a list to emotional intelligence, critical thinking, collaborative problem solving. And these are some of those core 21st century learning skills you've probably heard about. So we've built our framework for teaching and learning around future-focused learning goals.
And when you talk about TNL, I think one of the things that does come up is how do you integrate, say, social emotional skills or critical thinking skills or collaborative problem solving into the curriculum? How have you done that? And can you tell me a little bit about the RWIS Way?
I'll start with the RWIS Way and then talk about some of the sort of programs, how we actually do it. So from those 10 future-focused learning outcomes, it's one thing to define what's important and headed, but how are we actually going to get there? So that's the RWIS Way. And we built a model around with the student at the centre, and then we defined exactly what type of learning will allow us to achieve this with those 10 learning goals with our students. Then what type of teaching will support that learning? And then the third pillar, it's sort of like I'm doing this with my hands because it's like an onion with the layers. The last layer is what sort of school environment will allow that to take place. And so for anyone interested to dig a little deeper into the model of the RWIS Way and maybe see how you can take that and use it in your own context. So for other heads of schools or principals looking to define high quality teaching and learning, I definitely think that's a model that you could take, review, and work with your team to define your own contextually appropriate definition. But that's sort of the crux of how we go about it. Things like, the learning needs to be very purposeful, meaningful to students. It needs to be based around an inquiry approach. The teaching needs to be future focused. It needs to be adaptable to all learners and holistic in nature, accessible to all students. My favourite is it needs to be joyful.
Yeah.
Learning needs to be joyful. It must be fun and engaging for students. And then, of course, the environment, trusting, safe learning community that values growth, student agency. But again, go to the website, have a look, and you'll get a better idea of sort of the RWIS Way. So then what does that look like in practice in our program? So one is we need to embed this. If it's the core of what we do, it can't be co-curricular. Often you'll see schools have their character development program as a co-curricular model or as a standalone subject. Yeah. What we've made sure we've done is we've built it into our inquiry journey, which is our curriculum. We call it the inquiry journey. So in every unit of work, we've got 6 big questions. In every question, we're building in these aspects of character development. And so we assess them through the units, we report on them through the units, and they're not an add-on. They are the core of what we do embedded in the curriculum. Sorry, I went on a little bit there.
Well, I think what I am understanding right now, there's a lot of theory and a lot of thought involved in actually building this curriculum from ground up. We know that you blended the Cambridge curriculum with the Spanish and the Scandinavian philosophies, right? We do understand that. But also to integrate all forms of, say, character development within your inquiry-based process, or at least framework. I think one question that I do have is, how do you look at the assessment then? So how do you assess a child's development through this process of, going through the entire curriculum? And how do you see, or at least how do you notice that shift, if there is any?
Yeah, it's quite a small shift, actually. Schools are very good at assessment, maybe too good. Maybe we do a little too much assessment of young children. Definitely a little too much assessment of learning and maybe not enough assessment for learning. But the small shift is, what are we actually assessing? What's sort of the core aspect of the program? What learning do we want to influence and measure? And for us, that is things like collaborative problem solving. So if we're working on a project in our inquiry unit, yes, there will be some learning outcomes from Cambridge that we would be assessing as well. But in that rubric, we also include a rubric for collaborative problem solving or critical thinking. So it's a small shift. You're just making sure that you're actually assessing the most important learning that's taking place, which is that character development, the people, the human aspect of what we do. I can explain a little how we've blended the Cambridge curriculum our way. So we feel like the strength of the Cambridge International Program is their scope and sequence of learning objectives that are really well defined and scaffolded across the program. Where we felt like we could shift it a little bit was the approaches to teaching and learning and the philosophy of teaching and learning. And that's what the IB has done really well, and that's my background and most of our staff. So we've taken a lot of the philosophies and approaches to teaching and learning from the IB, like the inquiry-based approach. So we've blended these two philosophies while also acknowledging and valuing our Swedish heritage, which is a strong system based around culture and character. as well as, we're in Spain and we have a very strong Mallorcan and Spanish team, particularly with our language program. So we sort of tried to blend the best of all of these systems together. And I think one thing to say is, we're not a British school, we're not a Swedish school, we're not American, we're a true international school.
And because you've combined so many philosophies together, or at least the Spanish, the Scandinavian, the IB curriculum, all of these frameworks together, what that's giving you is also an edge above, not an edge above, but an edge on your entire whole child approach, right? Because you're constantly thinking about, okay, what do these kids need when they graduate? What is something that they will need in terms of skills when they graduate from the school? So just from that, I think that acts as a great segue for me to even ask about, like you spoke about creating global citizens also, making them adaptable and compassionate as well. So how do you intentionally create those scenarios or at least processes and within your framework, as we were talking about that? Can you give us some anecdotes where you've had, say, any form of these future ready skills integrated into a lesson?
Yeah, if I think about a specific program that supports this idea of international mindedness, global citizenship, it's probably what we call community time. Every Friday, our entire school has an hour put aside for what we call community time. And through this, we look at different ways we engage with the community within the school, but also beyond the school. So this is where we do a lot of this service and experiential learning. And of course, that's embedded throughout the inquiry journey through services action components in all of our units. But this is a special time once a week where the whole school has time to come together. And just last week, how we used this time was a fun run for leukemia. And we had all of our students from 5 years old up to 13 years old, as well as our staff, doing a half an hour fun run, raising money and awareness for an organisation here in Spain who works to provide research in leukemia. So that's sort of one example of what that looks like across the school.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Matt. I think one thing that I'm also listening, or at least I'm hearing right now, is while you're building a framework where the students are also learning, they're getting opportunities to get out of their class. Right? They're getting opportunities to actually apply this learning, of whether it's collaborative, problem solving, critical thinking. You're talking about compassion. You're talking about adaptability, which is absolutely wonderful. I think then the question does become, how do you sustain that, or how do you make sure that this learning sustains?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely a work in progress. We are in our second year, and even when I talk about the curriculum, we've done a lot of work, but there's a lot of work to be done. And this is one area that we're still moving forward. There's various ways. One is based on my research, which was looking at how international schools and NGOs can work together to achieve sustainable development goals. And so we've taken the nice thing about starting a new school and finishing your research at the same time is you can put it straight into practice. So we've done that, and we're building 2 NGO partnerships with NGOs here in Mallorca. One who works with us in the first half of the year, SOS Mum, is a social enterprise supporting mostly at-risk mums and women in the community. And then another, Save the Med, who's an environmental based NGO who works with sort of environmental research and regeneration of the Mediterranean. So we work with them for half a year each. And it's a work in progress, but we're building a really strong partnership where our students are advocates. We're not just fundraising, but we're really learning about and advocating for the cause and building a long-term partnership. So that's sort of one aspect, one example. The other is what we call the RWIS Explorers program, which we're actually building at the moment. And this will be a series of residential programs where students can take what they've learned in their inquiry journey and in their character development program, what we call Class Connect here. And then they'll have a residential program, sort of a week without walls, where they'll be able to engage in sort of more in-depth experiential learning opportunities. So I've employed someone awesome who's been all over, from London, Qatar, Madrid, now in Mallorca, who's leading the charge.
That's wonderful. Again, you're getting all the sort of international exposure to the kids, right? And when I talk about international exposure, you're trying to get the world to them, which is absolutely wonderful again, right? So,
Yeah, in the team we employed this year, we employed 13 new staff and 12 relocated, and one was from Mallorca, and it's a really strong team who bring diverse experience. We have people coming in from New Zealand, Australia, London, Sweden, South Africa, quite a few from Spain who are returning to Spain after spending time working overseas as well.
right. But how to build that sort of sense of trust? Because starting a school also means starting a community from zero, right? How do you build that sense of trust and belongingness with the first families who really took that leap of faith to join you?
Yeah, they took a leap of faith, and we're very grateful to the families who placed that trust in us. Trust to deliver a building first that's authorised, accredited. That's no small feat here in Spain, going through the licensing, the insurance. And they placed the trust in us to employ these exceptional teachers and recruit. And also those teachers placed a lot of trust in us too. To join a school in its founding year, everyone takes a little risk. But then everyone's also really bought into what we're doing. And everyone's been involved from the start in building something they truly believe in. That includes our families, our founding families. My first message to the founding families on our first day was: great schools are built on strong communities, and strong communities built on trust. And I thank them for trusting us, and then explain the steps that we'll be taking to, earn that trust over the year. And that was, through building good connections, having great communication, open door policy. We surveyed our families to really learn where we can improve. As a new school, there's a lot of areas that we're doing great in. There's also a lot of areas we can continue improving in. We're very cognizant of that. And the way you do that is you listen to the community.
How wonderful to even have that sort of awareness and consciousness for yourself and for your school team. But as a school leader, what was your biggest leadership challenge when it came to rapid growth? We know that your enrollment has also doubled since the last year. So how did you, or at least what are some challenges that have been coming up, even with respect to recruiting great teachers and also maintaining the small class personal interaction?
I think for a lot of startups, the challenge is sort of balancing, early financial constraints. And we've been very privileged to be in a position where we have 21 schools in the network and a very strong financial position. So that hasn't been a challenge for us, which I think it normally is for new schools, where we've had the resources to really go for it. Whether it's the building, the furnishing, the curriculum, the staff. So that's been a real plus. So saying that, the biggest challenge has been finding the right staff. Yeah. What we're doing here is, it's a challenging way to teach. We have very high expectations on the high quality teaching and learning being delivered, the RWIS way. So to find the teachers who are excited by that and have the experience to deliver that high quality teaching and learning has been a challenge. And the reality is that the economic situation in Spain for teachers isn't like it is in Asia or some other parts of Europe or the US. So with that came a challenge, but also what we've found is that people coming here have been coming for the right reasons. They really want to be a part of building a values-driven, future-focused school. And so what we've found is a lot of our teachers are coming from leadership school, and they were looking for an opportunity now to really, grab something by the reins and run with it. So, but that was definitely a challenge, is finding the right people.
I can completely understand, especially as a startup ourselves, we can completely understand how crucial it is to have the first initial staff members to be the core team, right? Like they're the ones who are building everything from ground up then. And to have everyone in a mind space where you're thinking about, okay, we need to maintain this vision for our school, right? So what has been one non-negotiable must to do, or at least must do list as a founding head for the school?
Yeah, must do's when you're founding a school. Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah. Number one, I think, is the guiding statements. You really need to believe in them, and they need to influence everything you do, because that's sort of your North Star. It's what you're aiming towards. It's your ambitions, your dreams, where we're heading. It's your promise to families. This is what we promise to do. This is where we're headed. So I think getting those guiding statements right in a really collaborative format, so that founding team have real belief in what they're doing. I'd say from the guiding statements, the next thing is the strategic framework. Guiding statements, your strategy. We just rolled out our second strategic plan. So we had an initial startup plan for the first year, and now we've gone into our first real strategic framework, which we call a future-focused journey, 2025 and beyond. So we think it'll take us for the next few years. And then, so that's sort of your roadmap. You've got where you're headed, your roadmap, and how you're going to get there. And then the third thing is the people. You've got to have the right people in place, and really making sure that the people who are going to sort of take you on that journey. From there, then we go into policy development, curriculum development. But I don't think you can tackle those two things, policy and curriculum, until you've really nailed down where are we heading, how we're going to get there, and who's leading us there. So that was my strategy. That was my approach anyway.
So you mentioned where. So where do you want to lead the school, or at least where do you want the students to be? How you're going to do it, and the people involved in it who are going to get you there, right? What a wonderful sort of framework to just put visually as well. Mm-hmm. So just building onto this, I think you touched upon future-focused education also in some format, or at least your future-focused orientation in the school. With new technologies, especially with AI now, what do you see as the key to ensuring teachers feel prepared and confident to use these tools effectively? And if you can touch upon how the teachers are dealing with students as well using AI.
Yeah, that's a question all schools, teachers, school heads are currently thinking about. How we engage with emerging technologies in a meaningful way, how it's going to shift the way we go about education for the positive, of course. We realise that that's a core both challenge and opportunity moving forward, and we've made it a key pillar of our strategic development framework. So one of our pillars, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's something about future-ready learning, AI, digital innovation, emerging technology, and how we remain human-centred. Mm-hmm. And that's the core part for me with emerging technology and AI integration is let's look at how we can not compete with emerging technologies, but really focus on the things that make us truly human, the emotional intelligence, the collaborative problem solving with other people, the way we communicate. And these are all the things I've already mentioned about 21st century learning skills. So you see how it really comes together. It's a real synergy between where we're heading with emerging tech and making sure that you have a future-focused learning approach. So we've sort of nailed down our steps for this, and it involves, how we're going to position ourselves as a leader in international education with AI and emerging tech. Step one was get the right people, as we talked about before, and I believe I've done that with a gentleman named Seth, who joins us from the International School of Phnom Penh, a real energised, visionary IT leader with a lot of experience, but again, someone looking to really drive a new school forward. And so what we're going to do is we're going to develop the policies, practices. We're going to develop a digital and AI integration curriculum. But then within that, we're going to look most importantly about how we remain truly human-centered and focus on those 21st century learning skills, particularly emotional intelligence, which just can't be augmented by technology at the moment.
Right, absolutely. And how wonderfully you put this again. I think it all boils down to that strategic sort of framework, or at least that strategic development framework that you've set up for the school, and constantly we are creating the whole child approach and also the future focused orientation that you want to take. Right. So you're constantly thinking about collaborative problem solving. I'm going to repeat that again because I think this is one of the core that all uh, teachers are also trying to build in their classrooms, especially with guided practice as well within their lessons. So sometimes we do deflect from that, but we want to keep coming back to it. And it's absolutely wonderful that the school is actually focusing on this and doing this consciously.
Yeah,
Right?
thank you. It's a good summary of, I think, where we're at and where we're heading. We're quite clear in where we're heading. It doesn't mean we're there yet. We've got it's always a journey, and we've got a lot of things that we need to keep improving on as a new school. But I think that's what families see in our school too, is it's a school who has a clear vision and strategy and knows where they're heading. And of course, there's speed humps, we call them in Australia, along the way, but we are all pulling in the same direction.
Right. At the end of the day, it is a marathon, right? So, yeah. Right. And so just finally, what's one piece of advice you would give to an educator who has that dream of one day starting their own school?
Oh, wow. That's I feel like I have a responsibility to give a very good answer here. I think find enjoyment in it. I love what I do. It's a very challenging thing. Last year it was probably the most challenging year of my life, and both professionally starting a school, personally having my first child and moving to a new country. It's not an easy thing to found head a new school, but when you truly believe in it and you love what you do and you really have that passion that drives you, I think that's what sort of keeps you moving along. So my advice would be make sure it's a project that really calls to you.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Matthew, for joining in today. I think it was a very insightful conversation, especially with what you and your team are doing at RWIS. And I think this RWIS way that you've spoken about over and over, I think it brings about some sort of motivation and insight into or at least it can bring that about for every listener who's going to join in and will try to inculcate these learnings and also the framework that you mentioned, which looks like an onion peel, which is full of layers, and the 10 different skills that you were talking about. I think all of this is going to be so helpful and so insightful for educators to even take back, even for their own classrooms. So thank you once again, Dr. Matthew. And any final words before we
No, just thank you, Chelsea, for the opportunity to share what we're doing here. And I'm always happy to hear from other educators around the world who are sort of on a similar journey and share experience in practice. So happy to hear from any of your listeners who like to connect.